Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Bob Mendelsohn, and this is the Bob's Your Uncle podcast. Today we speak about the problems and the joys of walls. I'm going to share with you from inside this art exhibition in Sydney about walls and what walls us away from one another and what gives us comfort as well. Stay tuned. Thanks for joining me for this Bob's Your Uncle podcast, Season 3, Episode 21B, for bonus. Of note, the opinions are strictly my own. I hope you like listening to Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor. It's one of my favorites. You can now find us and comment to us wherever you get your podcasts. Tell us what matters to you, what triggers your joy, what bothers you in the world. Let us know. We'll see where the Spirit leads us. Whether you're at home, online, on the road with me in your headset at the gym, or out for your evening constitutional, wherever you get your podcasts, that's where we will be. Thanks for being with us these 18 minutes.
Science book. Don't know much about the French answer, but I do know that I love you, and I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this will be.
Today is the 9th of May. And on this date in history, in 1800, American abolitionist John Brown, who led an assault 59 years later on the federal arsenal at Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, that was the main precipitating incident to the American Civil War, was born in Torrington, Connecticut. In 1936, 7 months after invading Ethiopia and driving Emperor Haile Selassie I into exile, Italy annexed Ethiopia as part of Italian East Africa. On the 9th of May in 1960, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved the first birth control pill, and 10 years later, the Beatles released their final album, Let It Be. Although it was mostly recorded before the Abbey Road album a year before, it was their last official release as a group. And that's the historical marker of the week. A thought to kick us off today. Do not remove a fence until you know why it was put up in the first place. Here's a quote from GK Chesterton. We might fancy some children playing on the flat, grassy top of some tall island in the sea. So long as there was a wall around the cliff's edge, they could fling themselves into every frantic game and make the place the noisiest of nurseries. But the walls were knocked down, leaving the naked peril of the precipice. They did not fall over, but when their friends returned to them, they were all huddled in terror in the center of the island, and their song had ceased. That's from GK Chesterton in his book Orthodoxy, page 53. I really like Chesterton, and maybe you do too. He wrote enough about this that John Kennedy, the President of the United States, back in the 60s, really liked him. I don't know if it was because he was himself a Roman Catholic like Chesterton. But Chesterton's fence is a heuristic inspired by a quote from the writer of the polymath G.K. Chesterton's 1929 book, The Thing. It's best known as being one of Kennedy's favorite sayings, as well as a principle that Wikipedia uses to encourage its editors to follow. In the book, Chesterton describes the classic case of a reformer who notices something like a fence across a road and he fails to see the reason for its existence. However, before they decide to remove it, they must figure out why it exists in the first place. If they don't do this, they're likely to do more harm than good with its removal. In its most concise version, Chesterton's fence states the following: do not remove a fence until you know why it was put up in the first place. Friends, that's what I'm thinking about today as I'm sitting here inside the art exhibition in Taylor Square in Darlinghurst, Sydney's east. Looking across at the council building, across the other side of the road is St. Vincent's Hospital, and down the block another couple hundred meters is the Sydney Jewish Museum. I am and we are at room 205, cleverly titled. That's 205 Oxford Street, and you're invited to join me and join us. I promised you last week that I'd be live from here, and so it is that I am. And I'm thinking today about second order thinking and about walls. Now, opening night here for the exhibition is this Saturday night, the 13th of May, from 5 to 8 p.m. It's going to be a very exciting time to gather and consider walls in your own life. Chesterton said this quote, "I look at the world and simply discover that they don't. Those countries in Europe which are still influenced by priests are exactly the countries where there is still singing and dancing and colored dresses and art in the open air. Catholic doctrine and discipline may be walls, but they're the walls of a playground." Maybe I should tell you more about walls here. Walls of pain and walls of hope. Our world is wrapped in chaos. Stridency in personal relationships and hostility between former neighbors characterize part of the problems. Families are time poor, and sometimes flat out poor, and wonder when inflation's power and their own powerlessness will end. Addictions numb the pains, or at least try to do so. Politicians promise the moon and stars, and at times we have hope, but almost always we end up disappointed. Religions also make promises with stories of Bible heroes and Hollywood happy endings, but often we're walled away from the God about whom they speak, and those walls seem insurmountable. At the same time, walls may speak to you about something entirely different. Walls can mean security, like Chesterton talked about those children, as in the defense of a city kept from enemies in times of war. Having walls around your home, say in Johannesburg, that's the norm, keeping the wrong folks away from your house. Gardens often have high walls, and the sense of peace is often highlighted whilst inside. An in utero babe is surrounded by uterine walls. An infant's crib is their first out-of-the-womb home, and those walls surrounding the newborn bring comfort to both parents and child. Walls have to do both with enclosures, so a sense of belonging, and prevention, or rejection, that is, both of the enclosures of security and the incapacity to get along with others, walls of pain and walls of hope. In this exhibition, we have curated artwork from artists around the globe whose art speaks to us of those walled stories. And if you come here, you'll experience what they've painted, or in one case, made of Lego blocks. You'll ponder how walls affect you in your world today. Let their art speak to you. And if you come here, you'll be able to express yourself in one of 4 different ways. You'll be able to share on your Your Thoughts wall, taking some of our art supplies, paints, tape, papers, and pens, and draw on the canvas that's there at the time. Perhaps these questions could be answered by you. What walls you away from people? Or, this wall makes me feel secure, or such. The canvas is open for self-expression. starting on Saturday night and through the month of May. If you want to communicate verbally or even on film, we also have a Film Me, Thoughts on Walls, towards the back of the gallery, where you can share your own impressions and considerations about walls and belonging. We value individual ideas and what you are wondering about. A third way to share your thoughts is in a Lego brick installation. Yep, we've got 10,000 classic bricks of Lego, and you'll be able to build or disassemble a wall to your own pleasure and to your own statement. And then the fourth way to share with us is talk to anybody wearing a lanyard and saying, I want to tell you what I'm thinking. That's going to be probably the most exciting. Some people really do feel walled away from God. The Bible addresses this early on. In that Bible, we read that Adam and Eve walked with God in the cool of the day and related well to him. But after their relationship was broken due to the problem with authority, that first sin recorded in the first book in Genesis, God evicted the first couple from Eden. He set angels who stood guard over the garden, and thus our first parents were prevented from access to the Almighty. We were walled away from him. And I think we've spent the last 6,000 years trying to get back into relationship with him. Or as Johnny Mitchell said, we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. For those of us believers in Yeshua, the Jewish Messiah foretold in the Jewish scriptures, we also have a sense of walls, but in this case, the walls of hope and comfort. There are some paintings and even a photo here in the gallery. There's a painting from the scene of Moses being taken up from the river in the basket. And then there's the picture of the walls of the city of Jerusalem, a photo taken around 1924 or so. Walls have a new meaning for us. We are welcomed into a relationship with God, and therefore we belong. We're surrounded and loved, part of a family that has mutual support as a key driver. Both Jewish and non-Jewish people are welcomed into this family, as the scriptures teach. Joy and gladness replace sorrow and sighing. And we look forward to what the Bible calls the New Jerusalem. Who are the people whose artwork we have showing here at the gallery? Anatoly Baratinsky, born in Russia, moved to Israel when he was 29. Karen Cook was born and bred a New Zealander and lives there to this day. She's got 5 different pieces here. 4 different pieces, including one that's really tremendous about the wall itself. Penny Fallhammer was born in South Africa, moved to Germany, and eventually settled in Perth. Natasha Golikov was born in Harbin, China. You can hear that's a Russian-sounding name. She was of Russian parentage, and she eventually settled here in Sydney. And finally, Yoram Ra'anan, born in the U.S., settled in Israel back in the 70s, and we have 6 of his pieces on display. One of the most significant is the paintings of Justin Hook, who's got one called The Comforter, which really zooms in on where real comfort is in the midst of the walls of Israel, where he painted that. Leanne Corrigan lives up in Newcastle, and her art, called Shoreline to Horizon, won the first prize in Newcastle at the Port of Newcastle contest that took place earlier this year. We're privileged to have that one on loan from the port itself. Matthew Peet has a graffiti painting style, and he's got a couple apparel, jean jackets, denim if you will, for him and his son, one of his sons, that you'll really enjoy. And last but not least is Jackie Heron from Canada, who's married to our Jewish brother David and her paintings while they were living here in Sydney last year. Beautiful walls of shoreline. Try to come, try to visit us. We'd love to welcome you. Every week we read from the #1 bestseller of all time, the Bible. Today is no different. From Psalm 91, verse 4, He, God, will cover you with His pinions, and under His wings you may seek refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and bulwark. Do you have a comment or a question? Do you agree with me talking today about walls and what separates you from others or others from you? Do you think walls are good? Well, it depends really, doesn't it, on where you are. Are you inside the wall or are you prevented? Are you outside the wall trying to get in? Well, let me know what you're thinking. Hit us up on bobmendo@aol.com or on Twitter or Instagram on Bob's Your Uncle PC. Or look, wherever you're getting your podcast, just write to me right back there. That'd probably be the best way to do it. You could also post a review on Apple or Spotify, wherever you're getting your podcast. Tell your mates, would you? Your friends? Thanks for helping us get known out there. Next week, I'm going to interview Isaac Brickner of Los Angeles, who runs the cafe called Upside Down, whose Aunt Martha, the nurse we interviewed last year about euthanasia and end-of-life matters. Isaac has much to say about mental anxiety as he deals with university students in this regard regularly. You won't want to miss that interview. In fact, there's enough that we'll probably make 2 episodes of Isaac. I think he is well worth your listening. If you live nearby and you want to come by and visit room 205 here on Oxford Street, we'd love to welcome you. We open, as I say, on Saturday night, 5 to 8 p.m. with wine and cheese, with Lego bricks, with video stuff. Come on by. 205 Oxford Street, Darlinghurst. God bless you. So come visit us, room 205, that's 205 Oxford Street in Darlinghurst, right near the Jewish Museum. Thanks for being part of the Bob's Your Uncle podcast family. See you next week. Until then, from me, Bob Mendelsohn, when things seem bleak or uncertain, look up to God. He's in His heaven. And Bob's your uncle. Shalom from Sydney.